So we are waiting on a couple of board members who are stuck in traffic. I believe one is parking right now, so we will start shortly, we hope. Welcome to the Board of Education September 12th, 2022 work session. Please stand as we observe a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Horn.
Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, announcements, board members, I think everyone got the notice on this, but the annual workshop previously scheduled for September 22nd and 23rd has been rescheduled to September 28th and 29th. A meeting agenda with specific times and a location will be provided closer to the dates. Are there any requested changes to this agenda?
Move to approve.
So a motion by Ms. Horn, a second by Ms. Henderson. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And I'd also like to welcome and introduce our 3 new board members. I had the pleasure of spending a day with them prior to them being sworn in, of course, and we had a really good day, and I'm really looking forward to working with each of you. So we have Reverend Dr. Butler from the 1st District, Ms. Catherine Bike from the 4th District, and Mr. Steve Triplett from the 7th District. And we're just really glad to have you all on board. Not to put you on the spot, but would anybody like to say anything or? No? Okay. Oh, Reverend Butler?
Good evening.
Good evening. We are so glad you're here. All right. Superintendent, Dr. Roswick, I believe you have a report for us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the board, I have a few brief updates since our last meeting. I'd like to begin by saying thank you to the First Lady of the United States, Dr. Jill Biden, and U.S. Secretary of Education, Miguel Cordon, for visiting Sarah Green Academy this morning. Dr. Biden and Secretary Cardona, I'm saying that wrong, sorry, Cardona, were in Knoxville to highlight the Grow Your Own program, which provides incentives to students who want to pursue teaching as a profession. I was very proud that they were able to see the amazing work of Sarah Green and their students and teachers, and I appreciate Principal Robin Curry and her team for making our district proud of their visit. I also want to extend a thank you to First Lady Biden and the team at Pinterest for giving the staff at Sarah Green a teacher lounge makeover. This is an incredible gift and one of the many ways that others in our community can support teachers at our school. So I was able to go to, not the Sarah Green event today because there was a lot of logistics from the White House, obviously, that didn't allow that to happen, but I know some of you were able to join too at the event at UT, and I think that was pretty exciting for us to see that in our community. Last week there was another important event that took place that I want to highlight. As you know, Knoxville hosted an annual Medal of Honor celebration this year, which recognizes recipients of our nation's highest military honor. It was a great privilege for me to meet Medal of Honor recipients who visited Bearden High School, and was also pleased that students at Farragut High School were able to host a celebration. Service to our country is a tremendous calling, and I hope that the KCS students have a new appreciation for that mission. They're very moving stories to hear the folks tell their how they served the country and just what that meant to them. And I think I was kind of left with just the humility they had. Like, none of them felt like they were heroes, and I think that's one thing that made them heroes for sure. So great for our students to be able to hear that, and our OTC units to be there and watch that happen from our schools. The state of Tennessee also today released designations related to school achievement, and results highlight several opportunities for growth for our district. Specifically, 29 of our schools received designations that reflect a need for additional supports, and the district's overall accountability score was in need of improvement, which reflects a ranking in the bottom 5% of scores statewide. Academic growth and chronic absenteeism were the areas that significantly impacted our scores. So I'll say this, our achievement scores, we did see a slight rise in those, but as we get the other data that's coming out, it's kind of, I think, in some ways what we've expected from the impact for the last couple of years. But to be in the bottom 5% of overall accountability is not where we want to be. We'll talk about that a little bit more on Wednesday when we host a press conference at Copper Ridge to talk about some of the designations. So we'll talk through some of that. But on a positive note, we did have 9 of our schools honored with the reward designation. So I want to say congratulations to those schools. That is Bluegrass Elementary, Copper Ridge Elementary, Farragut Intermediate, Farragut Middle, Farragut High, New Helpwell Elementary, Sequoia Elementary, Shannondale Elementary, and our L&N STEM Academy. So as I said before, we'll be holding a press conference at 9:30 on Wednesday morning at Copper Ridge to address the data around these school designations and to celebrate our gains and the great work of our educators. And then finally, I want to remind everyone that the annual coupon book campaign begins Thursday, September the 15th. This important fundraiser helps address school needs such as playground equipment and technology, and all proceeds will go directly to the school where the book was sold. I'm thankful for the merchants who are participating in the campaign this year and look forward to seeing our students join forces to support their school communities. And Madam Chair, if I could, before I end my report, I would also like to call on our Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Jennifer Himmelgarn, to introduce in person our Executive Director of Talent Acquisition, Mr. Alex Mosman.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we're excited that Mr. Alex Mosman has joined the team as our Executive Director of Talent Acquisition. He comes to us most recently from Indianapolis Public Schools, where he was the Director of Talent Acquisition. Started on August 22nd, so he's beginning his 4th week with us. The last 2 weeks, we've seen him in orange, so he is already all in. We're very excited about the work that he and his team are continuing and developing.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Roswick. Next up, Ms. Kelly, I believe you have an Esser update for us.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair and members of the board, Dr. Reiswick, thank you for giving us this opportunity every month to provide an Esser update. Or maybe not. So before I start with our spotlight for this month, I want to go back and revisit some of the things that we talked about last month. We talked about having a community meeting so that we could get input from the community. But instead of having a one and done, we've decided to have an Esser link that will be on our website so we can get ongoing feedback from the community. And we're also going to distribute our Esser fall newsletter the week of September 26th. And so the link will also be in our Esser newsletter, so community members, parents can also give us ongoing feedback through that link. So again, as a reminder, the KCS strategic priorities are directly aligned with our Esser focus areas. So for this month, we will be highlighting success for every student. Under each focus area, we have strategies, and those strategies are going to be measured by what we call impact metrics. For coherence, we have 4 guiding questions that we use to determine how we even decide what an impact metric should be. And so we talk about how or what are we trying to improve, what is our system to improve it, at any given moment, how will we know whether we're on track or not, and if we're not on track, we need to pivot and we need to do something about it. So when thinking about impact or impact metrics, we have to be clear on 2 things. The first thing is we have to be clear on the impact of what. The of what will be an intervention or a practice. And then we have to think about the impact on what. The impact on what will be the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. Impact metrics are specific, they're small, they're focused, and most importantly, they're doable. So if you're a visual learner like me, the of what, again, is the intervention or practice. The on what is the outcome, and then there's a feedback loop. And the feedback could be quantitative, it could be qualitative, or it could be both. It depends on what the impact metric is. So to tell us more about the strategies and the impact metrics for success for every student, I have presenting with me this evening Assistant Superintendent Jason Myers. I also have the Director of School Culture, Janice Cook, and joining us will also be Dr. Andrew Brown, the Principal of Central High School. So with that, Assistant Superintendent Myers, if you would take it away.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Reiswick. I'm happy to be here today. I'm here, I guess, at all of them, but specifically to talk about the work that we're doing under Priority 4, Success for Every Student. Obviously, the Division of Student Success is entirely committed to that work, so excited for the opportunity to share. Before we dig in and get to an overview of the work happening within the priority, just wanted to refocus us on our belief statements. And really, I'm not going to go through and read every one. Essentially, what we want to do is keep student success at the center of every decision that we're making as district leadership. So that's what it needs to, as we're having conversations, what sort of programming, what sort of interventions, how is this going to impact student success? If we're not considering that, eyes off the ball, right? Also, we're committed to making sure that students have the interventions, supports, and services for some of our students when they're necessary for them to be able to access their education. And then finally, we believe that it starts with a foundation of a safe and welcoming learning environment, and that the learning environment should be welcoming, regardless of your cultural differences that you bring into the classroom. So Priority 4 is driven by these 5 strategies. The first one is our whole child support team. I'm not going to talk really about that today, except for to say that it's in green, so it's on track. Mrs. Cook and Dr. Brown will be sharing some of the work there. That's the one we're going to be diving into this evening. Intervention supports for students, you'll notice, is yellow, which means we have had a setback. I want it to be noted, though, that the setback is really only tied to 2 pieces of that strategy, and we're working through the procurement process currently to get those caught back up. So I don't have any concerns about us not being on track as it relates to hitting the deadline to have the Esser dollars spent. Also important to note is that there's a lot of really great work already happening within that strategy, even though it's in yellow. So one of the biggest things that we've done under that strategy is we launched our second Project Search program, and that is our partnership with Covenant Health in Sertoma, and it's an excellent post-secondary prep opportunity for students with disabilities who are in their exit year of high school. And it's really focused on those job skills, employment skills, and if you ever get the chance to come to their commencement ceremony, as they're going through that process of graduating from that program, each graduate in the 3 years that we've been with Covenant have exited that program with employment. So it's a really great program and a great opportunity for those students. In addition to that, we've also expanded our alternate academic diploma curriculum availability also for students with disabilities, so we're really pleased with that. And then finally, we've made significant improvements to our independent living curriculum as well. So while we have that coded yellow, we are doing a lot of really great work within that strategy, and we're looking forward to getting, again, caught up once we get access to the additional programs. Intervention Supports tracking system, you'll see, is on track. We already have that database built. Christine Pope and her team have done an excellent job. And really the focus of that strategy is to gather data to help us determine how are these interventions and supports actually impacting student learning, right, or student outcomes. And then we use those data to go back to the whole child support team to determine, is the intervention working, and if not, what other interventions might we use? So the first three strategies there really build off one another as it relates to making decisions around how we're going to serve kids. Maintenance of our technology investments. To date, we've installed over 1,000 active panels in our schools. Freddie Cox's team is, I think, knocking those out at about 20 a day, which to me seemed pretty impressive, that while we're running schools, while they're running all of our networks and all our other tech programming, we're still able to install those active panels. And then finally, our facility investment is also on track. Again, bear in mind that's that fall 24 launch. And as a reminder, that facility investment under Priority 4 is the upgrades to the Lincoln Park facility to bring it into ADA compliance, and that is where we hope to house our newcomer academy, of course, which would be geared at supporting those students who are new to our country and enrolling in our high schools. So really excited to get that off the ground once we have the facility upgrade completed. So again, that's an overview of our strategies and sort of where we're at. Again, very pleased with the progress that the team has made in terms of getting as many of these pieces in place as possible, and I look forward to getting the final two pieces of the puzzle as soon as we can with that intervention and support for students. So with that, I want to turn it over to Mrs. Cook. Mrs. Cook is going to share with you guys tonight the work that she and her team have done around whole child support. I think it's really exciting, and then once she concludes, Dr. Brown will come up and let you know what it's like in practice. So thank you, guys.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Reiswick. So it seems like it wasn't that long ago I was here. I remember I was to talk for 5 minutes then, and I talked for 13, so I'll try and keep it short and sweet to give Dr. Brown a chance to talk. So let's go back to the theory of action we have for the whole child support teams. We talked a little bit the last time about fall into your structures. So if we look at this is our theory of action for our team. If we provide high-quality professional development for whole child support team members and staff, then the whole child support team will be able to align the interventions to student support, students' behavioral and academic needs. And then this results in improved students' behavior, attendance, and academic outcomes. So that really is the theory behind the process that we're using. So if we look at where are we today? Where are we from the last time we met? So we're going to look at a variety of different things: the number of teachers and staff that we have trained, the quality of information shared on referral. So that's what the information that we get from the teachers to make sure that the referrals are appropriate referrals. The quality of the whole child support team meeting, the actual process, how we get through that. Are we spending too much time talking about things that are not related to or support appropriate outcomes? Do we run a tight meeting? Then we'll look at attendance, the trends for attendance, behavior, and achievement. So it's the things there that we can glean from the big picture, as well as the specific students that we need to address maybe as a school, or is it something that we need to address just specifically as a child, each child. So here we have how we report out. I'm not going to read how we're going to report out. We can read it, but there's a variety of different places. So we're really at the point where we're doing the work now, and we're moving on. And you don't get a variety of data back week by week. So we'll be looking at quarterly or semester results for some of these areas and some of these metrics. So to recap, when we met last time, I talked about we had met with administrators. So first of all, we started with administrators. We met with administrators, we trained the administrators on the foundation, the goals of the whole child support team, and then we brought members of their teams together. So we met, we had the principals, then we had the administrators, and then we had leading members of their school teams. And again, we set the foundation. We basically did the same training for the staff. And then we did a makeup training for some people moved around, and there was additional people added to teams. So we did a makeup training on that first foundational training in August. Also in August, we started identifying and providing training on some of the specifics for our teams. So we reviewed what the whole child support team was again, but then we discussed what are the specific roles of the team members. We choose people specifically. It's not just, I'd like to be part of the team, come along. You have a role to play, and it's expectations of the documentation that you bring to the team. So we reviewed what those were so that teams that did not have members assigned to roles could start thinking about that. We then have produced documents that could be used. If schools don't have their documents set up and they've been using ones that have been ineffective, then they can look at some of these documents that we have produced. So we have Google Docs that make it really pretty succinct and have address all the needs. So we shared those documents. Schools can take those documents and they can modify them to suit their needs, or they can make sure that what they're using actually covers all the same areas as what we had outlined in our documents. And then we gave the schools some reflection. We asked them to go away and then give us feedback on the defined roles and responsibilities they had within their schools, and then to look at what supports do you provide for students under Tier 1 and Tier 2. Because if we're going to match interventions with behaviors or issues, then we need to know what's available and what you use in the schools. So we're having schools do a little bit of analysis of what they have within their building. Members of my team, the Department of School Culture, we have gone out and we have gone and visited with schools and provided them some support, some feedback. It will take us, maybe till next month to get through all the schools, and we've added more since this was typed up. But we have gone out and we have met, and what we realized was that there really is different schools are at different levels. We have great works going on in our schools. All schools have participated in the foundational training. Goals have been established. Most schools have assigned team members. The schools are reflecting. And then the schools are self-identifying their level of implementation based on a rubric. And it's a pretty basic rubric. We do have some schools that are developing, which means that they're really putting together new teams and creating their process. So we have some schools that we're going to go in and we'll give them, heavy support, because we can come in and help walk them through so that they don't fall down any, pit holes that we know that we can avoid. So we'll go in and we'll support them. We have a lot of schools that are in approaching where they've established teams and meeting outcomes are implemented with moderate fidelity. The staff supporting tiers are identified. So they have a lot of the framework put together, but they need to have it tightened up so that they have the best bang for their buck when they're in that time. And then we have a few schools who are reaching effective because they have been doing this for a number of years, and they have action plans with comprehensive supports. A new element that most of them haven't met is the root cause analysis, because we haven't got to that place there, with questioning to address, whole child, what is actually the supports the kids need. And then we need to look to see, does the data prove that action plans have had a positive impact? So if we're looking at, are we doing all this and getting an outcome, the outcome that we want? So I can say that we don't have any school at this point that is fully immersed and effective, but we have a few schools who are actually have a very solid process to build on. So what are our next steps? So the next steps we're going to have is the development of the differential training programs for the supports for the school. Based on what tier they are, we will divide out the training. We don't want to have schools that have a good process sitting listening to very fundamental things where they need more detailed training, more training on the root cause analysis supports that may be there. We're also going to talk about the pre-referral training and begin training so that the teachers in the classroom can know, have we looked at other things before bringing a child to the team, so that we're getting the appropriate students who are coming to the team. An example would be if a child is having struggles with, maybe there's some situation at home where the kids come in and they don't have socks on, or that we're worried about something, that there's something going on at home. Maybe that's really not a whole child support team issue, that's a social worker issue. So let's look, have we talked to the social worker? Have we got the social worker involved? And then go down that path before we actually take it to the whole child support team. Then we're going to work on that breakdown of the root cause analysis process. And then in October, we're going to start looking for our data on behavior and attendance. So we're then, as our staff, we're going to have a walkthrough document that we're going to look and see how can we support these schools. So we're going to have a walkthrough document, and then we're going to develop a library of 10-minute trainings that they can use at the beginning of teams, they can use in staff meetings, so that we're building capacity within our schools. We're building capacity not just in that team, but maybe in their staff meetings or some part that's integrated into their school plan. So that's kind of where we are at this point. The work is going on. To say, we have the foundation there. Now we just have to do the work for the next couple of months. It's just digging deep and doing the work that we need to do. So I'd like to call on Dr. Andrew Brown. Central High School has had the whole child process in place now for a year or so, and I'd like him to share just some of his experience with you.
Thank you, Ms. Cook, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board and Dr. Reiser for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing at Central High School around whole child support. I can tell you this is my 4th year at Central. When I first came to Central, there really wasn't a whole lot in place. And so one of the things we started with is how do we support kids, whether they're struggling academically, behaviorally, with attendance from a social emotional standpoint. How do we make sure that we're meeting all of their needs so that they can be successful in school? I'd had some previous experience at Southdale Middle School where we had put in a PIT process where teachers would submit referrals. So we began with that and started to try to do some of those things when I came to Central. Unfortunately, the people who were responsible for kind of organizing that kept changing. And so what we had is we had a referral form that was created. We had our own little Google form, and then that person left, and people were still submitting, and then those referrals were going somewhere, but no one knew. So last year, Mrs. Cook and the school culture department approached me and said, hey, we'd really like to streamline a lot of these processes, and we'd like to try it with you if you don't care. So, of course, I was all on board, which was great because Jeremy Majeski came over and provided us with a Google form that was consistent, and we knew who owned it, and we knew where the results were going. And so we could get together on a monthly basis and look at the referrals that teachers were making, address the needs. And the best part was as we got together as a group, which included administrators and included our social workers and our counselors and all the people who could sit around the table and problem solve and come up with some solutions to help support our students, as each time we would get together, we would leave that meeting with an action plan for each individual student who was brought to us from the teachers or from faculty, and then also a point person who was going to be responsible for that. And so we left with some accountability, knowing we've got a plan and this is the person who's going to implement that plan. And then the next month when we got back together again, we would follow up on each one of those people, as well as visit any new referrals that we had gotten. So it's I can tell you as a principal who's in his 17th year of being a head principal, this process is probably one of the most important things we can do. Because again, we're trying to eliminate any barriers that students have and make sure that they can access school on a daily basis, whether that means, finding supports for their families, like Janice said, with, if they need socks or if they need food or if they're having housing issues. Social workers are a great tool in our staff that help them to find those resources and things they need. It gives counselors and our behavior team and different people more information so we can begin building those relationships and having those tier 2 and tier 3 processes where we step in and do check-ins, or we're making sure that we're supporting those students. And again, it's individualized, so each student we discuss specifically what they're having problems with and how we address those. And the neat part for us is what we saw is throughout the year, last year was really a change. At the beginning, we noticed that a lot of referrals were coming from 1 or 2 teachers. And so as we looked into those things, what we found is we started off by supporting teachers and making sure that they had the tools they needed and the resources, and we would send in our interventionists or our behavior support people to those classrooms and making sure that we were supporting the teachers so they could provide students with the education they need. And as we moved on into this first and second semester, then we really began to see, as we worked with those teachers and helped develop, as Jenna said, some of the training for teachers and knowing how to refer or what to put into referral, what kind of information we needed. That enabled us to then build those specific action plans so that we could make sure we were addressing those students' needs. So I think it's a great thing. I'm a huge proponent as the person who's in the building and making things happen at the student level of consistency. And I think that this is a great tool that if we can consistently implement this model, and I know each school has their own personality and their own unique differences, but I think in general this is a process that supports kids. And anytime we can keep that focus, as Mr. Myers said, on the student, then we're heading in the right direction. So really, I don't know if I should field questions or turn that over to you. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Sure.
All right, so thank you, Andrew. That brings us to the end for priority 4. So next month you'll hear from Ms. Himmelgarn about great educators in every school, and we will take questions. I don't imagine that you'll have any for me, but Dr. Brown and Mrs. Cook are here as well.
So I just have one quick question. I believe Mr. Watson has one as well. So the links for community input, are those on the website, or are we saying we're going to have those on there soon?
They are currently not on the website yet. We want that to correspond with when we release the newsletter.
Gotcha.
And so that will be the week of September 26th.
Awesome, thank you. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Brown or Mrs. Cook, I'm not sure who's the best to answer this. I appreciate you all emphasizing that this is really a process that we're talking about that's being implemented in schools. But in the context of that process, I know that there's certain tools in the toolbox of those whole child support teams. Can you all just talk some about those really critical tools that are available for these teams and some of the most impactful trainings. I mean, I don't want to belabor too much, but just some of those things that have been really key and defining of this process. Yep.
So I think that if you remember way back when I did my first analogy about being at the medicine cabinet, you have a sore head. And what do you take for your headache? Because you have different reasons why you have the headache. That's kind of what we're doing. As we go into it, we're building out training so that when we are presented with a student, we have looked at, is this a trauma-informed situation that's going on with this child? You know, is this something that they're dealing with culture? Do we need to look at that? Is this a skill deficit? These are all things that are obstacles. So as we look at what are we providing, we provide trainings in, all those schools. We give schools trainings in all the different areas that fall under the Department of School Culture. What we need to do in this is we then make it really specific, and that's when we go into that root cause analysis that we'll be doing in the future. We'll be looking at helping people work out what is the difference and how can we assess whether it's the difference between a skill deficit and a trauma-informed issue.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the clarity. I think one of the things that's important to note, and tell me if I'm saying this back correctly, is that really what we're trying to do is help our educators and those in the school building to better understand what is it that I'm actually seeing in this moment. And then based upon what I'm seeing, then I'm able to help get them the appropriate support instead of having to own that all on their own or making guesses about what might be happening or what might not be happening, that it's more of a team approach so that way we can get people to the right type of support that they need. Is that fair?
Yes. If you're trying to support a child and it's not working, then you need to be able to think, what else can I think about that might be hindering this child? And if you don't know what else to think about, then you just, everything's a nail if you only have a hammer. So, I mean, that's kind of where we're looking at building the capacity within staffs to look at when children are struggling or they're facing an obstacle, there are different elements they need to consider.
Yeah, well, thank you to you and your team for the investment that you all are making in our educators and our school-based personnel to be able to do that effectively, because at the end of the day, it impacts our students each and every day. So thanks.
Great. So do we have any other questions or discussion? Okay, well, thank you, Ms. Kelly and Mr. Myers and Ms. Cook and Dr. Brown and the entire team. So moving into discussion of our regular agenda, any comments, discussion on the consent agenda, 5A or B? All right. Mr. Watson?
I'm sorry. I'm on contracts. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah. Well, moving on to that. Contracts, items 1 or 2. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there, I know why we're having to do the contract amendment on item 2 related to our transportation services, and I know this is probably hard to estimate, but do we have any thoughts or guesses what the impact might be from a dollar perspective on a quarterly basis or on an annual basis? I know there's a threshold, and there's a threshold that we have to meet before we start paying into that.
Dr. Eiswood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Watson. I'm actually going to defer to Dr. Adams and his team on that one.
Thank you, Dr. Reiswick. Thank you, Mr. Watson. No, you're exactly right. It's a very difficult estimate. What I can tell you, looking at the range from $20,000 to $60,000, we have seen gas prices stabilize, and so we're hoping it will be on the lower end. But when we looked at the total cost of last year and with the increase of this year, that's what we basically base those numbers on.
So you're saying the range is $20,000 to $60,000?
That is correct.
Okay. For the school year?
Yes, that's annual.
Thank you.
Ms. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have, a follow-up to Mr. Watson's question. Is there a cap that ensures that we don't go beyond the line item budget that's there for that?
I'm actually going to bring Ryan up and to discuss the contracts.
Great.
He can get in a little more detail about the actual contract.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owen.
Thank you. To answer your specific question, no. This money comes out of the same place that our bus contracts are paid out of, our shuttle contracts, it's all the same line item. So there is a speed bump, if you will, built into this amendment, whereas if gas eclipses a certain level, then we have to bring it back to the board to ask y'all to essentially reauthorize the expenditure.
So if it were over 60,000, we would do this again?
The speed bump is tied to the actual price of a gallon of gas as opposed to the aggregate spend. So, yeah, I mean, the part that's difficult to this is our shuttles are a, pardon me, they're charged per student based on the distance that student travels. Right. So a lot of how much it costs is how we route things. So there's not, I don't know, it's a lot messier than buses. You know, it's, we use them for specialized populations, homeless population in particular, so it's also a very mobile population. So it's difficult to pull these sorts of things together, but again, going back to a specific answer to your specific question, there is not a hard cap that would say like, okay, we're done, we're not going to do this any longer.
Okay, thank you.
So any other discussion on 1 or 2? Okay. Items 3 or 4? Five or 6? 7 or 8? Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is actually not about one of the specific educator prep agreements, but specifically, Dr. Reiswick, because of the Grow Your Own program and the attention that was brought to that today, can you just speak generally to the value and the importance of our educator prep agreements?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Watson. So I'll have Ms. Himmelgarn weigh in as well. So, you know, they're extremely important. I mean, this is the way we get our teachers certified. What we find is the majority of our students who intern with us, this opens up the opportunity for us to intern a lot of our students and our student teachers, and being able to do that, a lot of them actually stay on when we have positions that are open to be hired. Some of them we even, you know, hire on before they're finished if it's a special needs area for us to be able to do that. So in order to have the shortages, as you see nationwide and even here, we need more than one, obviously multiple EPPs or educational prep providers to do that. And so they are extremely important. You know, we are our own educational prep provider for career and tech education as well, so we can certify teachers in that. But for the most part, what you'll see on this list, I think, are the majority ones that are kind of traditional ones that place interns with us, and that we very much value those. I don't know, Ms. Himmelgarn, if you'd add to that.
Madam Chair, Board Member Watson, I'll echo what Dr. Reiswick said. Very important for placement of our interns for job-embedded licensure pathway. Also, the partnership agreements, I believe it's 5 through 11 that are on the agenda tonight, are state partnership agreements. So they're a requirement of the EPP to submit to the state of their district partners.
Okay. Items 9 or 10? 11 or 12? 13 or 14? Ms. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the community schools MOU, this is just something that I would like to see in the future as a follow-up to this, since this is a little more general for whichever school they determine they want to be part of. Once that happens, I'd hope to see also an MOU with the principal and the staff, so that we don't go into this partnership and then maybe we change administrators and they drop that before it gets very far. So I'd like to be sure that we have something in place so that the staff is committed to following through with it. Thank you.
I can jump in real quick. Sorry. Thanks, Ms. Owens, for that, and Ms. Owen for that. And so community schools are kind of in a position right now where we're trying to come together with a model. And I know, the Knox Ed Foundation has been a part of that. UT has also been a part of that, and I think both of those entities are working together to try to come up with a model. Kind of my conversation with both of those groups was, I want to be able to, as the superintendent, to speak to this is what community schools is for every school, and I think that's what you're talking about too, so that, I know some communities have some different needs, and we adjust to that, but overall, we should have a view to be able to tell families and schools this is what they are. And to your point, it needs to be something that carries on, kind of I think about like the IB program at West. Even if you have a change in leadership, how we do and what we do on those are important. So I think some of this one in particular was tweaked because there's some change or some additional schools that wanted to add on to it. And so I think that's why they opened it up for that one. But I think you make a good point.
So items 14 or 15? 16 or 17? 18 or 19? 20 or 21? 22 or 23? 24 or 25? So moving on to grants, 6. Item A. B or C? D or E? Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On item E with the Elevate program, I know we've just had our inaugural year, and it's coming back before the board for this grant. Dr. Reiswick, can you or somebody else speak to that inaugural year and the success of that program and what we've learned from it?
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Madam Chair, I'm actually going to have Mr. Meyer speak, but I have been out to see that, and it is pretty powerful alternative for those students to be able to have a chance to still attend school, even after some different circumstances that they're in. So it is neat. It doesn't feel and look like traditional school the way they do things, so it's pretty neat. But I'll have Mr. Myers expand.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Reiswick. Thank you, Mr. Watson. So a little bit just to I guess, preface with, this was last year was the first year in a pilot, and honestly, a pilot that was pretty unique in our state. We're the first, as far as I know, we were the first public school system to try to dive in and develop this sort of a program. So year one was a learning experience for sure. So some of the established goals was the student enrollment of 10 students. They had 23 students actually pass through the program. Various circumstances led to not all those students staying for the entirety of the school year. They actually ended the school year with 8 students, but at the very end of the school year, 3 of the students, which would have been for a total of 11, entered into a more intensive treatment program. So they were just given access to a different program. So we do feel pretty strongly we would have made that goal. Our partnership with Helen Ross McNabb is essential to the success of that program. So it does really put the recovery component really at best alongside academics, but honestly is even ahead of it as it relates to the amount of therapy that they get access to help support that recovery initiative. So that's all through Helen Ross McNabb. And again, with that first year being such a learning experience, and we saw that there was a demand, Helen Ross McNabb actually moved the program into a larger facility. So our goal is to end this school year with 25 students. They have 13 currently enrolled and 5 more awaiting interviews. So that process to get, you don't just get to sign up and be in Elevate. There's an interview process that Helen Ross McNabb leads up to make sure that the student is actually ready to participate in a recovery program. We also, from lessons learned in that first year, changed how we do the academic component of it. As Dr. Reiswick referenced, the academic piece there does look very different, but it looks a little bit more standard this year. They do have access to live instruction. We've partnered with the virtual school to provide live instruction around ELA and math. That's where we saw the greatest area of opportunity last year. And we're also trying to leverage more Canvas courses as opposed to just setting students loose Edgenuity platform to go that way. So we do anticipate that there would be a higher rate of credit attainment this year. So really excited about the progress they made in year one, but I think year two, I think we have a lot of opportunity there. Again, just with having more space, again, a shout out to our partners there, having more space, I don't think they'll have any trouble getting that number up to 25 students.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. So you mentioned that you said recovery is a little bit ahead of academics in terms of outcomes, in terms of importance. Is the recovery measured in terms of sobriety, or how are we considering the impact of recovery in the program?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, it is certainly the priority. If we can't get the students past that recovery piece, the academic progress isn't going to come anyway, sure. Right? And so they actually last year they screened the students weekly on a pretty predictable schedule. They're actually changing that this year. And so in terms of the screening, it's not just do you pass or fail, but they actually look at the level of a given substance to see. So like when a student first enters a recovery program, they're obviously going to fail the test, right? Sure. So the first thing you look at is the level of those substances in their system, and then of course after that it becomes more standard in terms of are you staying clean or aren't you? And so that, again, that part of the program is really falls more with Helen Ross McNabb, but that's how you track it. Just a simple, you drug screen, and then you see, if it's THC, what level of THC is in the student system, and as it dissipates and is no longer there, you look for that consistency in clean tests.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I know all of us here would want to celebrate along with our students around that recovery and sobriety, and also those academic achievements as well. I think it'd be good to share with the board year over year some of that aggregate information in terms of what are we seeing there in terms of specific in terms of recovery and also the academic achievements. I think in general we all know it's a great thing. I think it's also good to be able to specifically celebrate the achievement of those students who are battling a pretty tremendous barrier at the same time they're trying to, accomplish things academically. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Watson and Mr. Myers. Items F or G. Mr. Watson.
I'm sorry, I do have a few questions tonight. On item F, specifically because we spoke about Esser tonight, and this has to do with social and emotional learning. Can someone speak to just the benefits of this particular grant?
Dr. Reiswig.
Thank you. I'll pass to Mr. Myers, who may bring Ms. Cook up.
Thank you, Dr. Reiswig. Yes, I think that Mrs. Cook is here, so I think that she'll be the most knowledgeable person on the grant. Thanks.
So to put this grant in perspective, we applied and received this grant a couple of years ago, just as we went into COVID. It was a grant. At that point, we decided we were going to focus in on supporting suicide prevention in a number of schools. We called it the Keeper Grant, and we did work in small groups in high schools and middle schools to provide support for students and teacher awareness. So this year, as we were applying for the grant, we were looking to broaden it out a bit. We were looking to say, what is it, especially through COVID, that we need to look at to support the students? And what we all know is that if students are not connected to their learning, connected to their educational environment, they don't do as well academically. So this grant is really about providing skill sets to a group of students, to 6 schools. We have leaders in the school. We have 6 students per school who are going to learn the skills to help connect students that may be on the periphery, or to have conversations that are hard conversations with each other. It's not about changing people's minds about anything. This is about perspective building, alliance, collaboration, education, and self-awareness. So these students, their remit for the year is that at the end of the year, They have to have gone through this process with their leaders, and they're going to produce something for their schools or something that we could use district-wide that could build connection within the schools, within the district. So it's really about skill building. It's about how to have a dialogue, how to have difficult conversations with people that you don't share the same perspective with. And it's really about creating a safe environment for students. Does that answer?
Any other discussion on that item? Thank you, Ms. Cook. Item G, under grants. Okay, moving on to contracts. 7, discussion or questions on A or B. Mr. Watson?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a technical question. I'm not used to seeing 2 contracts in one item. Should this be 2 separate items? Is it 2 separate contracts?
For
item A, since it's
item
2
A?
different entities.
You want me to answer?
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. Watson. So sometimes procurement will send over more than one vendor if they're responding to the same RFP. So that's what's happened here. That way the schools can use either one.
Okay.
I believe in this particular case, it's because perhaps there's such a demand for interpreters that one company couldn't handle the entire demand.
So is the total contract then 100,000, or is it 100,000 per entity? And I'm assuming it's a cap. So it's not we're committing to 100,000, it's based on usage rate?
It is a cap,
Yeah.
and I'd have to look back and see if it's per, but I was thinking it was just the one cap. But I'll
So 100,000 total between both
Correct.
vendors? Okay, thank you.
Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question. I don't know whether anybody can answer it or it really matters, but out of curiosity, are we talking about several languages, or is it most of the concentration in 90 to 95% of one language?
Mr. Byers or Dr. Ricewood?
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. So it is, we have, and I don't have an exact number, but I can get it for you if you'd like. But no, it is a broad number of languages. Part of the reason that we wanted to expand to have 2 contracts, and we also work with additional vendors. This particular agreement is just with 2 entities, but we can also use other vendors. The goal being to get our schools access to as many language options as possible. We don't want to run into an instance where we have a rare dialect being spoken, and in a pinch we can't get access to an interpreter in a timely way, right? So we're trying to cast a little bit of a broader net to make sure we do that, but there's a plethora of language need in our district, and part of this decision also came from conversations with Bridge Refugee and Centro Hispano. Just again, that need to have access to interpreters so that we can be timely.
That's fine. That basically you've answered my question. If you run into, as you said, a rare dialect, it falls on them to find somebody that can interpret.
Yes, sir. We would issue a request, and whoever could provide that, that's who we would use.
Thank you.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since Jim Hinton is here, I just want to make sure he has an opportunity to address us on the next one on B, if he would like or not. Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity. Look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
So that was on item B, right? Okay. All right, so any other discussion, questions on that? Okay, so item C. Or item D. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is the same question. It's actually for item B and C, and that is both of these have to do with additions for these schools. Dr. Garfield, can you talk to us about what additional capacity this will bring to each of these schools, these additions, and how much we're currently over capacity in those schools?
Yeah, so the Hardin Valley Academy, you're looking at roughly 32 additional classrooms. Sturkey, you're looking at 10 additional classrooms. Hardin Valley, for the 2021 school year, ended the school year at over 138%. Currently, well, that's 38% over. But this school year, you're looking at 20 additional students. The last number we pulled was 2,128 students opposed to the 2,108 students that Hardin Valley had last year. So not a great change as far as classroom sizes, as enrollment. However, we're still well over capacity. When you look at Sturkey Elementary, we are 107% over capacity, 7% over. So they were over 22 students this year. Last year they were at 365, last year they were at 343. This year we're at 365, 22 students over.
Thank you. I'm sure there's a lot of factors that go into when we start looking at building additions. I'm assuming that one of them is the amount of percentage that we're currently over. Is there kind of a threshold where we start looking at that when we start saying this, we need to start looking at this for this particular school?
Well, I will tell you that the industry standard recommendation is for schools to be at 85%.
Right.
So obviously we're
100 over, we're probably too, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, and I will tell you as a former high school principal, when you talk about classroom sizes, it really depends on your schedule, your master schedule. There's some classes you have are AP classes, and you'll be limited to 9 or 10 or possibly even 15 students opposed to 25 to 30 students. So we would have to take some time to look at the actual standard for classroom sizes, and then really dig into the master schedule. And so there's different formulas that we look at. This is looking at a combined of several different formulas and capacity and basically the function of the schedule.
One of the reasons I ask is one of the things that I hear a lot in the district from my principals, certain schools, is talking about how much they feel like they're crowded, right? Like they're over capacity. And, you know, it's always hard going back to them, especially when they see additions being built in new schools and they feel like they've had that same problem for 10 years or whatever, right? So I think the more educated we can be on kind of what are the things that end up causing that to rise to the level that we act, I think it's just a good thing for us as board members to continue to be informed on. So
certainly.
Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to follow up with that and give a little background on why Sturkey. There are several elementary schools in that area that are over capacity, and Sturkey has something the others don't. They have land. And so because they have so much land, it makes it easier there.
Okay, so item 7D. 7D?
Thank you. I had about 15 items in the middle that I didn't have a question about, okay. So I just want to make that known. So this is a pilot with Graphic Creations, and from my understanding, this is specifically for employees to be able to buy branded material with KCS. What I'm trying to figure out is, does this also, will this also happen at the school level? For instance, will somebody at Bearden High School now buy a Bearden High School cap if they're a teacher from this group? And if so, have we thought about how this might impact the funds that schools are currently generating for these types of items? And if this is a pilot, what's phase 2 to the pilot, meaning are we potentially looking at using this provider for also student access to branded material and that type of thing?
Dr. Risley.
Is that a question for Carly, maybe? I don't know.
I'll pass to Dr. Norton,
yeah.
and she can pass through these two. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rieswick, Madam Chair, Mr. Watson. The pilot right now is just to provide a store for employees to purchase KCS gear. Mm-hmm. We do not intend at this time to expand that to school level gear. Certainly that's something we can look at if there's a demand for that later, but we don't anticipate this taking any funds away from schools. It's also intended to remain an employee-only store. But Carly, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Okay. The main reason that I thought to ask the question is because it was referenced as a pilot. So there's always a next phase to a pilot, and I wanted to try to figure out what the trajectory was. So, thank you.
Okay. So regular agenda items. Item A. Item B. Item C. Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually had a question about item B as well. And typically, I don't have questions about line item adjustments, but the way I read this adjustment, it made me ask, because some of my schools have talked about the lack of personnel. Is some of this being reallocated because of underspending in salary and benefits for this particular group of our personnel? And how are we doing on food service workers for this year?
So it's a combination of things. Last year, we fed more than 8,000 students a day because of the new law that was passed for all students to eat for free. So that had a significant impact on our food cost, and that came out after we had already budgeted for that school year. Fortunately and unfortunately, we were able to absorb that cost because we had 50 vacancies last year. This year we have 30 vacancies. And so I will tell you,
in food service?
In food services, yeah. Last year we had 50 vacancies. This year we have 30 vacancies. And I will tell you, Brett has done a phenomenal job with her team. She was boots on the ground last year. She spent little time in the office, and her administrative team spent a lot of time in schools working. And so that does create an issue at the central office level when you look at customer service for the entire district, but they were able to do it last year. This year we're in a much better place with only 30 vacancies, but we do need to fill all those vacancies. But our numbers are more accurate this year because we're back to the normal cost that we budgeted for the 2021 school year prior to the change in law.
Anecdotally, have you all or Brett heard anything just about the 15% increase that we gave this year? Has that helped any in trying to fill some of those vacancies?
I would say it has,
yeah,
because we are up 20 employees, but we're currently working really hard to recruit people, and Brett has done an exceptional job. She's really good at advertising. So yeah. she takes care of that on her own and with her department, and so we're hoping. So if anyone's listening and if you're interested, we would love to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. I do have a question about the next item too, but just see if anybody else has a question about that.
Yeah. While we're talking about the nutrition department, she also does a fabulous job on social media promoting, the work that they do in our school cafeterias and all of our employees, and hopefully all the positive energy might help some with that as well. So, next item, let's see, item C, Mr. Watson.
Thank you. I know we're starting with the collaborative conferencing again. Can somebody just remind the board of that timeline, mainly because when we were approving the budget, we talked about doing a salary schedule study for the first time in 20 years, and I'm sure that these things will go hand in hand. So,
thank you, Mr. Watson, Madam Chair. So I'll say a couple of things about this item. One, I see our friend Paula Hancock in the crowd, so we get to meet. And last month we talked through this a little bit, and we're talking just through kind of. I'll say a little bit about the PECA team, and then I'll have Ms. Himmelgarn talk about the salary study. The way that's set up is that is how we collaborative conference with, and for us it's KCEA, the Knox County Education Association. We've had a great relationship for a long time with them. And so this is really a setup for us in our PECA collaborative conferencing where we meet once a month and kind of talk through the things for the next MOU that's coming up, and everything from salaries and wages to grievance procedures, insurance, fringe benefits, working conditions, leave, and payroll deductions are all things that are included in those conversations that come to an MOU for you all when we meet monthly and kind of work through those details. So this item is for us to look at as we've done some reorganization, some different folks to be able to put on that team. And I think, again, will come because of the timeline of things that are coming ahead in December to have this team approved again for the new MOU that's coming. So I'll turn over maybe timeline and salary study to you, Ms. Himmelgarn.
Madam Chair, Mr. Watson, yes, the salary study, the team is preparing the language for the RFP to put out for the salary study now, and we anticipate that when we receive those results back, that may be something that goes to the collaborative conferencing team to consider in salaries. But we don't, until we know what it says, we don't quite know how we're going to use it or who would have input into what portions are implemented.
Thank you. Can you remind us when the MOU would need to be enacted? Like, what's the timetable to have new things put in the MOU?
It is, the MOU is good for up to a maximum of 3 years, and I believe the most recent one was entered into in 2020. So the new one would be signed in 2023.
Okay.
I believe it was 2020.
Like during the summer or early 23?
July of 2020 is when it was
so July
entered
23.
into. Right.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Any more discussion on those items? Mr. Watson, are you done with that one? Okay. All right. So sorry, Susan.
It's okay.
Ms. Horn.
Thank you. Was one question about the salary schedule RFP. What is the time frame that you are expecting for them to have that work accomplished? I know you don't have the firm yet, but what is the timetable for that?
Ideally prior to budget, but I don't know that that's going to be possible with the amount of time that the RFP process will take, plus the amount of time it will take to actually do the salary study. Ideally, before the budget, I don't know that that's going to be realistic, though, so we may be looking at planning for the following year.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, so item D, reorganization of the board. This is something that I think we decided to put on our work session agenda at a previous meeting so we could vote on it on Wednesday. So if anybody has any thoughts or discussion on that? Mr. Watson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the work that the board did a couple months ago to kind of rethink how we do this and to be able to have some intentional conversation in advance of our meeting where we vote on it, which will be at the regular meeting. For those who have watched the board for some time, you know in the past we used to have a short meeting before the regular meeting. Now it'll happen in the context of the regular meeting. And Ms. Christie, I saw where, I think it was in the Compass today, you mentioned that you would be willing to serve again if asked. I think given all the change that we've experienced in the district with the superintendent and also with 3 new board members in, and a lot of that is very exciting. I also think for the board it would be good to have some consistency and leadership in the chair role. And I appreciate you being willing to do that and would hope that you would be able to do that again. Obviously, we don't have somebody in the vice chair role, and so that's something that we need to be thoughtful and intentional about with Ms. Satterfield moving on. But thank you.
So is there any other discussion? Ms. Horn?
I agree with Mr. Watson. I think we have had a lot of change over the last several months. So I'm glad that you're willing to continue. And we have, over the past several years, we've had chairs continue for 2 terms. And I think that's been helpful and has contributed to smooth continuity. So I appreciate that you're willing to do that. Thank you.
So any other discussion? Okay. So public forum, Ms. Coveney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have 3 registered speakers this evening. The first being Annabelle Henley. And Ms. Henley, if you'll just state your name and county of residence for the record, and you'll have up to 3 minutes.
My name is Annabelle Henley. I live in Knox County. Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to publicly thank Madam Chair for running such a positive campaign, and I'm looking forward to supporting this board and Knox County Schools as a member of the community. So tonight I wanted to talk about the spending of the Esser funds, and the current efforts appear to be well-researched and evidence-based and reasonable. And in normal times, that would be great. but we seem to be a little detached from the reality in our schools. From all I'm hearing from teacher friends and other friends who work as support staff, our schools our overwhelming problem is insufficient staffing, and I'm not seeing the staffing issues being addressed. A good analogy, I think, would be a parent who says, I'm not going to buy my kid any clothes this year because I have to save for college. And we all know teachers who are being affected by these difficulties. I'm going to share a story from a teacher who wishes to remain anonymous, and we have another speaker who's going to share some other stories, but these come from elementary, middle, and high school. It's located throughout Knox County. The first story is, it's really bad at my school. Right now, beside the normal sub shortages, we have several unfulfilled positions for various reasons. A coworker quit last month, another was out with COVID, and because we don't have a long-term sub, we're doing all the work of our teammate who is sick. We sometimes have subs, but not every day, and I have to explain everything daily to the new sub. The subs can't access Canvas, so the kids aren't getting appropriate instruction or access to their technology in some classes for days at a time. It's not sustainable. I can't do two people's jobs for an entire semester. I'm already trying to figure out what other options I have for employment. So from my own experience at the health department, we've been hiring educational assistants for clerical positions. We pay over about $31,000 a year for those, which is way more than what they're making as EAs. Two of them recently hired were in CDC classrooms, and so they're experiencing much less job stress as well. Two of my friends with 15 years of experience have resigned over the summer, and a third just called to tell me she's leaving. One of those is an educator of color who taught my son and was an incredible asset to Knox County schools. I know it's a very difficult position for you all, and there's no easy answer, but we have to find a way to make our teachers and support staff feel valued. Reasonable compensation is one of the best ways to do that. So I remember when you were deciding on your compensation for our new superintendent, it was important to you to make sure you're offering a competitive salary, and I think we need to use the same logic with our teachers and our support staff as well. Thank you.
The next speaker is Erin Keck. And Ms. Keck, if you'll state your name and county of residence, and you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Erin Keck, and I live in Knox County. Madam Chair and members of the board, I am sharing reports from 3 school staff members reflecting the critical staffing shortages in our schools. The first staff person said, "At my school, we still need a regular ed teacher and a sped teacher. Our permanent sub and 1 instructional coach has been filling in. That means our permanent sub is not even available to cover any other classes if needed." Another staff member wrote, "This is by far the worst year in comparison to even the virtual COVID years. Special education is a complete disaster. Due to the regional changes and several retirements last year, there is only 1 special education mentor per region. There are new special education teachers in many schools who have limited, if any, access to a mentor teacher. The mentor teachers are currently covering vacancies in buildings. Therefore, these new special ed teachers have no idea how to do any of their paperwork, collect data, and even do basic functions of their jobs. These facilitators are essentially unavailable, and so the SPED teachers are lost already. Finally, a staff member reports, "I honestly do not want to go back. There is no consistency in the school system for support of the educators or the whole staff. It seems that downtown wants things to go back pre-COVID, like test scores and teaching, but then we have to take into account that the students are not the same. We have to meet their emotional and physical needs before we can teach them, but it is stretching the staff thin when we do not have enough to go around. I urge you to make solving the immediate staffing problems in our schools the highest priority in Esser and other funding." Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Keck. And Lance McCold. Mr. McCold, please state your name and county of residence, and you have 3 minutes.
Excuse me. Excuse me, Lance McCold, Knox County. Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for listening to me. I think we've heard that our schools are in a staffing crisis. I want to say that I was really pleased with the way that Ms. Cook and Mr. Meyer are using the Esser funds for programs that our schools really need. But I have to say that you can't expect training in these programs to work if you don't have staff to fill the basic positions. And that seems to be where we are. Teachers and support staff have long gone above and beyond, but where we are now, from the reports we're hearing, is unsustainable. And I'm very concerned that we're not hearing about this during these board meetings. We're still, our students, our children are not getting the education they deserve because the staff aren't available to do the job the way they want to do it. We are asking far too much of our staff. We know the problem. The cost of living is up, so are wages. Because Knox County schools' wages aren't keeping up, we can't keep enough support staff. Our schools don't have enough custodians, aides, substitutes, and other support staff. This is a problem you know how to solve. Labor is a competitive market. If you need lumber, you pay Home Depot what it costs to buy the lumber. If you need workers, you pay a competitive wage. Knox County school shortage of teachers, support staff can be solved by Knox County schools. That solution is clear. Pay the support staff a competitive salary and lure them back from Target, and other places. Paying teachers more is important, but what's driving teachers to quit, from what I'm hearing, is the working conditions. And the working conditions means not sufficient support, not enough people to cover the classrooms. Those working conditions can be quickly improved by hiring more support staff. Imagine if there were enough custodians to keep the classrooms clean without teachers having to clean their own rooms. Imagine how much you could reduce teacher stress if there were enough aides so that no teacher had to work the bus lines or the cafeteria. We don't have to imagine. We could pay custodians, aides, and other support staff what it takes to hire them away from Target. Money, of course, is always a concern, but we have the money to pay competitive wages. In the long run, we have to pay a competitive wage. Let's do it now. Esser funds, we're sitting on $100 million for the pandemic and the fallout, and we are in the fallout. The labor shortage and high costs related to that. So let's do it now. Let's solve this problem. We've got the money. We've got no excuse. Do it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, that concludes public forum.
Ms. Pike.
I just want to thank the public forum speakers and also share that I have a friend that's a teacher in Knox County schools. She's been teaching for more than 15 years in Knox County schools, and she also shared with me today that she cried in the middle of class because of how terrible it is. And so I know that this is definitely a problem that we need to address, but I think I've asked a few questions about Esser funds, and I'm still getting clear on all of that, but I wonder if there's someone that can speak to how these are allowed to be spent and our restrictions.
Dr. Isley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Pike. So I'm probably not versed enough right now to speak to all of those, so I can give you kind of the overview of that and then what's allowable probably through our finance department and Ron and talking to Cheryl Martin. But overall kind of big view of that, those were made available for a couple things. That one was in the event the pandemic were to continue to be here, for things like safe return to school, as far as things like air filtration, different types of equipment or things that might be used to make schools safer in that side. And then the large part of the other was learning loss. And so those were kind of the two big things that the dollars were put in for. We did go through a process of talking to the community, talking within the areas that were laid out for us for that to be put into. And then from there, again, created the plan with the community's input to draw those out. But we can make modifications to those dollars at different times, but there are pretty strict things that we can move those for. So we could probably have, again, Mr. McPherson or Ms. Martin, who's over federal programs, come back at some point and maybe give a little more guidance on that than that. But I know overview, that's kind of the bigger part.
Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Reiswick, I know we talked some about this conversation when we were first speaking about Esser, and you all were elaborating much more then because, we had just gotten the guidance. And I think one of the things that we talked about was salaries and how we can support our teachers and support staff and things like that. And I think it was made known at that point that one of the things that we have to be careful of when it comes to our Esser dollars is making sure that we don't create an intentional fiscal cliff. And I think all of us would want to address that with those dollars, but I think that's one of the things that we got to be really careful of, is not creating a situation where we all end up causing more harm than good. So at the meeting today with Secretary Cardona and Dr. Biden, one of the things that Secretary Cardona said that stuck out with me is he mentioned that the teacher shortage is a symptom of a lack of teacher respect. That stuck with me, and I don't think that's reflective of us on this board. I think we have respect for our teachers and our educators, but I think one of the things that we have to be thoughtful about as a community, as a state, as a country, is that when we are entrusting educators to educate our children, part of that comes with some reciprocity, that we also have to trust them and respect them in doing that job. And I think the more that we can, as a board and as a district, continue to elevate our educators and our other professionals and our other people who are providing support in our schools, I think that will help bring people back to the profession. You know, the shortage that we're experiencing has not always been a problem, and we have to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and ask, why are we experiencing this problem now? And yes, pay is great. I don't know that Esser funding is the way to fix that problem long term, but there's other things that we need to be doing and considering as a district. So.
Ms. Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I took a minute there. I think part of the issue, if we're looking at working conditions, is not just the in-classroom working conditions, but also all of the extra things that teachers have to do that cause them many hours beyond classroom time. And if we are unable to use funds in a way that can compensate them for all of the things that we're asking them to do, we need to be looking at what we can take off of their plates. What things are we asking them to do that we really don't need to be asking them to do? I'd also say that district-wide, I've seen that it's not the same at every school. Some schools have a lot of extra things being put on teachers, and other schools have a lot of autonomy for their teachers. And the feeling in those buildings is massively different. When you walk into a building where everything is everyone is expected to do the exact same thing at the exact same time of day and be on the exact same page, everyone in the hallway, there's a feeling of stress in that building that you just really can't describe. And then when you walk in another building where here's our plan and here's what we're going to do and we're going to help each other, it's such a different feeling. And I think that the folks who are in those buildings where there are additional expectations being put on them, they are very, very frustrated. And I think that's where a lot of our losses are happening. I'd really like to see what is being taken off teachers' plates. I'd also like the community to know that I know Knox County Schools is reaching out and trying to find more teachers. I know that we have people downtown who have been on the phone calling retired teachers and trying to fill positions, and that they're being told no. So I think we need to look at the positions that we are having difficulty filling and see if we can find some more creative ways to fill those. Maybe not make it one full-time position, but make it 2 half-time positions or 4 quarter-time positions, whatever we have to do to fill those positions. Because we may have a lot of people out there who have an ability to work part of a day, and I think we need to do whatever we can to fill our positions as well as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Owen. And just briefly about the Esser funds and speaking to what Mr. Watson was saying, I think we were very intentional in how we were spending a lot of these funds in the sense that, we realize they're non-recurring. right? So if you invest a lot of money into positions, what's going to happen in 2 years when we don't have that money? And I think that's always something that we worry about, and all of us, whenever we make these investments, we want it to be sustainable, whatever we do. So, all right. So moving on to board forum. Ms. Deckard, do you have anything?
I just want to say that September is National Suicide Prevention Month, so I just want to remind everyone to be kind to everyone around you and to also be kind to your mind.
Thank you, Reverend Butler. Ms. Owen?
I'll be short, I promise. I got to sub a couple weeks ago in 7th grade science. Got to meet a lovely snake, and a couple of lovely snakes. One of them was just, orange and white, actually. So that was great fun. And you're still available, right?
Huh?
Are you still available to sub?
I'm not in a classroom with snakes, but yes.
Well,
yes. I will be happy to sub, but I will not sub in a classroom with snakes. I'm sorry.
So,
I have to have a limit somewhere.
I just want to remind our principals that we can do that, and I'll take the snake rooms if you'll take the other. I'm not going to touch them, but I can be there.
Yes, I am still available, but not with the snakes. Mr. Watson?
Thank you. Just again want to welcome our new board members, Ms. Catt and Mr. Triplett, and Mr. Butler, and also Ms. Bounds. I know is in the room, and I'm sure enjoying retirement. So I'm wondering, why are you back? But glad to see you again, and welcome to the new board. And also thanks again to the district and to the state for the work around Grow Your Own. We do know we have a teacher shortage, and I think this is a tremendous strategy to help provide some alternative pathways. Real quick, for those who weren't there, I love that on the panel. I mean, I hate that I'm trying to guess this woman's age, but she was probably like late 50s, early 60s, and she's a first-year teacher, right? So she's had another career and doing her thing, and through the Grow Your Own, she's like, hey, I'm going to teach and do this thing. And then there was a high school senior on the panel who, for the last 3 years, has been investing in her own skills and ability to become a teacher. So I love that this program really broadens the net for those who we think would be, in a teacher pipeline and want to come into our school. So thanks so much for the district, John, and also for the for Penny and the state. So
thank you, Ms. Byton.
Thank you. I just want to say that I'm so excited to do this and work with everyone, and please forgive me in getting acquainted with all of these procedures.
Ms. Horn.
I'll just add a welcome to our new board members.
Ms. Henderson.
I just want to welcome our new board members as well. It seems like forever ago since we had a meeting. It seems like it was so long ago. So welcome to our new members.
Mr. Triplett.
I just want to publicly thank Mrs. Bounds for her years of service to our district as a teacher, and then obviously as the board member, and then also for being a resource to me as I've started this role. She has been somebody I can text and say, hey, I've got a question, and so I really appreciate that.
Mr. McMillan.
Just a comment, and you may be aware of this, but the air show that was at the airport, the person who was over the show was a graduate of Doyle High School. And he's trained numerous people, and it's amazing. I heard him talk quite a bit being interviewed, and it was amazing some of the things that they had to do and go through and everything. I just wanted to add that.
I did not know that, so thanks for the shout out to South Knoxville there. That's awesome. All right. So with that, we are adjourned.